This is the sermon for the first Sunday after the Nativity of our Lord. This morning we are reading Matthew's Gospel, the second chapter, beginning with the 13th verse. Now after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken to the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing in loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled, because they are no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. This story of Herod killing the children in hopes of eliminating the threat of a potential rival, the so-called massacre of the Holy Innocents. This is one part of the Christmas gospel we often try to avoid. After all, is this not the season of light, of joy, the season of happiness and togetherness? We have this beautiful, bucolic story of a baby born in a stable, surrounded by friendly beasts and awestruck shepherds. Singing angels announce peace on earth. There is so much pain in the real world. Why should we want to mar the brief respite the holidays provide to talk about this act of senseless violence? Why focus, even for a moment, on a ruler so cruel that the first century historian Josephus records that in a separate incident he killed 2 of his own sons? Isn't there enough violence and sorrow, enough mourning, enough corruption and hatred and death in the world around us? Now it's said that the population of Bethlehem, the little town of Bethlehem, was around 1,000. Now if that's the case, there likely would have been around 20 boys in the right age bracket for Herod to slaughter. The same number, by the way, that died at Sandy Hook just about a year and 2 weeks ago. But then perhaps because this slaughter of innocents is indeed such a familiar historical trope, perhaps that is the reason why we need to look at this story. Because the Incarnation, and that is, after all, what we celebrate, or at least what I believe we should be celebrating at this Christ Mass, does not happen in a cultural vacuum or a spiritual vacuum. That is to say, God does not take on human flesh and frailty in order to give us an antidote or even a momentary escape from the vale of tears we call reality. But rather, God enters our time and our space, interjects himself into the midst of reality, The love of God impales itself on thorns of sorrow and even cruelty, offering a way to ultimately shred the veil of tears so that the light may become more visible. So too our celebrations of the Christ Mass must be held in view of the world around us, the world at war, the world that is hungry, the world that is hateful and cruel. Christmas should not be an escape from the ugliness or the drudgery of life, a tinsel and garland Victorian technicolor fantasy. Rather, it needs to be the demarcation of radical transformation, the model for what the world will become. Do you find yourself feeling warmth at Christmas? Do you find yourself perhaps a little more willing to forgive, a little more loving, a little more affectionate towards your fellow creatures? If so, then don't keep that locked away in the room with the dead or otherwise artificial pine tree. Don't put it away with the blow-up audio animatronics reindeer. Don't put it up in the attic alongside the box with the mercury glass ornaments, safely tucked away until a few days after next Thanksgiving. Because you see, that warmth, that love, is not an end in itself. It's not complete, any more than Jesus' mission was complete when he arrived as a helpless infant. Undoubtedly the love of Mary's barely adolescent life. That Christmas warmth and love and joy is a seed that needs planting and tending. Better yet, it's a spark that needs to set the world on fire. So we look at this story and we see that it presents a number of challenges. Now I call them wonderful challenges because they challenge our understanding of what God is all about. And that is something always necessary, never more true, I suspect, than in our day and age. It really doesn't take much of a biblical scholar to stumble across the irony of the Holy Family's flight into Egypt. Once upon a time, the Bible tells us, God went to rescue his people from Egypt. Now, depending on your take on the Old Testament, this took place some 1200 to 1500 or more years before the birth of Christ. The children of Israel were enslaved in the land of Egypt, and Moses was instructed to get them out. Though it seemed that God was also playing both sides of this drama. For we are told that God also hardened the heart of Pharaoh. Only after the last of 10 plagues, the death of the firstborn child in every household that did not mark the doorpost with the blood of a sacrificial lamb, as is described in Exodus, are the Jewish people allowed to end their abusive servitude. Though there is scholarly debate on whether it was God himself or an angel, the Torah is clear that God willfully killed the children of the Egyptians, children who had nothing to do with the Israelites' captivity, who were innocent of the matter, innocent, in fact, of just about everything. And then we fast forward to the 2nd chapter of Matthew, and we see God, incarnate in Jesus, fleeing, running away from a mass murder perpetuated by a human ruler. Running, we are told, to the very place of historical slavery, to that land of disgrace, where the Jews were once held in bondage. Could it be that among whatever other reasons Jesus came to earth as a helpless child, born under highly questionable circumstances, he came to teach us what God the Father, his Abba, was really all about? Can it be that Jesus came to teach us that it's not God the Almighty so much as God the vulnerable? Is it possible that God is not a killer at all? Now, I know this offends. It causes some of us to stumble. I have stumbled over it myself more than once. But what if God is not a killer? What if God is a lover of your soul and of my soul, and of all the souls of all the people that ever were and ever will be? A lover of Israelite souls and Egyptian souls and Palestinian souls and American souls and African souls. Maybe that is the scandal of it all. That big, ugly brick wall of a stumbling block that we crash into head first and heart first when we realize that Jesus is the visible image of the invisible God. And we are not called to worship a book as an inerrant talisman, but rather we are called to follow a man, fully human, in whom the fullness of God dwells. Perhaps God flees from violence, and it is very hard to find God when we let violence overtake our hearts. And God's only real answer to violence is to meet it as a lamb led out to the slaughter, breathing forgiveness even as he dies. If Jesus was willing to say, "My Father is not like what you think, not like the image you glean from what you consider to be your sacred writings," if Jesus could critique the writings of old, if Jesus could point us towards a clearer, less conflicted, more compassionate vision of the Holy One, might we not follow the lead of the one who said to his disciples, "Greater things you shall do"? Are we willing to give up an image of God forged after our own, that image in which we have so much invested? Will we have the boldness to say, "No, God did not make a mistake when he made the universe and mankind. No, God does not need a plan B. No, God does not require retribution. No, God does not need to punish anyone, including his own son or self, in order to save people from his own wrath." And most especially this morning, God does not need to slaughter children, not Egyptian children, nor Israelite children, nor anyone else, to make a political point. God does not kill to prove he is greater than the mute idols of Egypt, or Babylon, or Hollywood, or Washington. Perhaps I shall be judged a blasphemer, even as I am judged a sinner. But I simply will not worship a God who needs to destroy its own creation in order to prove its worth. And I would encourage all of you not to worship such an entity. Instead, look to the one who healed the sick, made the blind to see, raised the dead, forgives even the worst of sins, the one who does not break a bruised reed or snuff out a smoldering wick. But let me take us back from Golgotha to the manger, for it is still Christmas, despite what the malls and the mass media tell us. If God enters our world without violence, innocent of all its schemes, really having nothing to do with power and empire and the machinations of kings and governments, and we are created, verily being created in the image of that God, what does that say about us and who we are to be? And now, the very good news as we continue to celebrate eternity's entrance into our brittle time and space. You see, God does conquer. God wins. He is conquering even now. Jesus is victorious, and we do worship Christus Victor. But he is a lover, not a killer. And the weapons of God are not guns and knives and bombs. The mightiest weapons of God are truth and forgiveness, and above all love, by which even the fiercest enemy in time will be disarmed. Stay the course of peace. Do not return evil for evil. Pray even for your enemies, and in the fullness of time, the lion will lay down with the lamb. Every knee will bow before the innocent one, and we shall behold God's kingdom on earth.